hummed to herself one weekend afternoon while tidying the living room. Stacks of mail cluttered the coffee table, and a few opened envelopes lay strewn across the sofa cushions. She picked them up, tapping them into a neat pile. In the background, the soft buzz of a show she barely paid attention to hovered over her shoulders. A small sigh escaped her as she glanced toward the bookshelf, which held rows of framed photos documenting various phases of her life with Jason. Some displayed wedding moments, her white gown, Jason's proud grin in his tailored suit, while others captured random festivities and travel snapshots with vibrant cityscapes behind them. She realized that a while ago they had taken a spontaneous trip to a beachside resort in Florida with some friends. They'd spent hours jumping between the sea and the hotel pool. That trip had been filled with easy laughter, clinking glasses, and lazy afternoons beneath a blazing sun. There was one specific photograph she remembered loving, the two of them on a pier at dusk, the sky painted in shades of purple and orange. The picture was especially meaningful because it had captured them at a moment in which they were both brimming with optimism for the future. She hadn't seen it in a while and wanted to find it. She put the envelopes aside, then headed to the desk where their home computer was stationed. The plan was simple: log into their shared cloud drive, type in some related keywords like Florida, pier, sunset, and see if that photo popped up. They had thousands of images on that drive, carefully stored over the years, but it had become cumbersome to sort them manually. That cloud account, which they'd opened together not long after they got married, had always been something Amy found convenient. She loved how it kept everything organized, at least that was the idea. They had set up separate folders for vacations, family gatherings, work stuff, and so on. If all went well, she'd find the Florida folder easily, pick out that treasured snapshot, and maybe print it. Jason, in the meantime, was upstairs in the spare bedroom they used partly as storage and partly as his office. He was tinkering with a small portable speaker that had been giving him trouble all month, groaning under his breath whenever the thing disconnected from his phone. He planned to fix it once and for all, then maybe watch a few old reruns of a detective show he loved before coming downstairs to see what Amy was up to. The day was laid back, free from obligations, and he enjoyed these slow weekends when he could drift from one casual task to another. Downstairs, Amy's fingers flew over the keyboard. She logged in, double-checked the family folder, and then set up a search. She typed, "Florida Pier Sunset." Usually, the cloud's internal recognition feature was quite reliable. It tagged and recognized faces, places, even objects. So if she typed pier, it should pull up anything that looked like a pier. If she typed Florida, it might sort images with beaches or palm trees. She'd tested out these capabilities in the past when rummaging for holiday pictures. As the progress bar swept across the screen, she scrolled through the resulting thumbnails. The first row was exactly what she expected. The sky behind Jason looked golden. A friend was waving at the camera, a beach towel with bright floral prints in the foreground. She cracked a smile, feeling a wave of nostalgia. This was what she was after, a casual stroll through memory lane. But then, as the images kept loading, one thumbnail made her pause. It stood out because it displayed the figure of someone wearing a light-colored summer dress. The face was partially obscured, and for a moment she wondered if it was a friend of theirs. She didn't recall a friend who wore that specific style of dress on their Florida trip. Curiosity turned into confusion when she noticed the person's body proportions seemed very familiar, but not in a way she recognized right away. She hovered the cursor over the thumbnail. The face was turned in three-quarter profile, but there was something uncanny about those features. She clicked it. The image popped open, revealing a better resolution. The figure in the photo was wearing a pastel summer dress that fell just above the knees, paired with low heels. The person's gaze was directed to the side, as though self-conscious about looking into the camera. A street lamp to the right illuminated the scene. The angle was intimate, likely taken indoors before stepping outside, though it was hard to say for sure. It took Amy a long, puzzling second to register that the face looked far more like Jason's than she could have imagined. At first, she simply stared, uncertain what to make of it. Her heart pounded as she tried to rationalize the situation. Could it be some kind of image processing error? Could it be a Halloween costume from years ago? But the dress didn't look comedic or costumed. It looked casual, soft, something a person might choose to wear on a sunny day. And the photo's date stamp was from only a few months ago. She checked again. Indeed, the date was shockingly recent. She swallowed hard. Jason had never mentioned anything like this, never given her a hint that he would enjoy wearing a summer dress or presenting himself in such a manner. Feeling a flush of heat rise in her face, she clicked out of the image, back into the search results. Several more thumbnails had popped up, at least 4 or 5 similar images, each showing what looked like Jason in a variety of different outfits. One showed him sitting on the bed in a flowing skirt, glancing at his phone, a soft expression on his face. Another displayed him looking into a mirror, apparently taking a mirror selfie with a slight, almost shy grin. Amy realized all these images had loaded together because the AI recognized certain patterns: a person, a dress, maybe a specific object. Her chest felt tight. She wondered how she'd never noticed them before. They had a shared cloud service, but normally each of them had private folders. She never suspected that the search feature might rummage through everything, including what was supposed to be hidden. The family plan gave them separate logins, but left the content under one umbrella, and this advanced scanning function had no sense of personal boundaries. She took a moment to decide if she even wanted to keep looking, but curiosity burned inside her. She didn't know if she felt betrayed, worried, or simply disoriented. "You'd better talk to him, right?" she muttered to herself, though she wasn't sure if she was ready. She decided to check the folder location for these images. The search results listed a path she wasn't familiar with, some subfolder with a name that didn't sound relevant to vacations. She clicked on it. A password prompt came up. Her heart drummed a little harder, but because she was already logged in with the main account, it bypassed any requirement for additional verification. It led her to a private folder titled Personal J. Inside were about 24 images. She recognized the face in every one of them. Every single shot featured Jason, but dressed in clothes she'd never seen him wear in day-to-day life. Floral dresses, long skirts, blouses, sometimes with light makeup. Different backgrounds suggested different times or seasons. Some images looked like they were from the cooler months, with a coat draped over his shoulders. 1 or 2 were from warmer days, as though he'd stepped outside onto the porch in sunlight. And they all contained that same earnestness in his expression, a guarded awareness that the camera was capturing something deeply private. Tears threatened to form in her eyes. She wasn't angry exactly. It was more that she felt this wave of disorientation, a sense that the world had shifted without her knowledge. She felt a pang of hurt for not being entrusted with this side of him. Quietly, she closed the folder, shut down the search, and stared blankly at the computer screen for a few seconds. A swirl of questions rattled in her mind. Why hadn't he told her? When had he begun doing this? Was he ashamed or worried about how she might react? She rose from the desk. Her footsteps were muffled by the carpet as she made her way upstairs. Jason was still tinkering with the portable speaker on the bed, unscrewing the back cover and muttering whenever the tiny parts refused to align. He looked up when he heard her approach. A warm smile briefly lit his face, but it faded the instant he noticed her unsettled expression. "What's up?" he asked, placing the screwdriver down. "You look pale. Are you okay?" Amy stood in the doorway, arms crossed over her chest. She considered what to say. There was no graceful way to bring this up, so she simply let the words out. I was searching on our cloud drive for old photos from Florida, and I found some pictures, in your personal folder. Jason froze. A flicker of panic darted across his features. What pictures? She took a slow breath, trying to keep herself calm. You, in a dress, several dresses, skirts, blouses. She hesitated before adding, It's labeled personal, J. I wasn't snooping on purpose. The AI search, it pulled them into the results. He set the speaker aside, hands trembling slightly. No, I mean, that folder is private. The AI was never supposed to. I had no idea it would cross-reference images like that. He went to brush a hand over his face, but then let it drop to his lap. I'm sorry. You weren't ever meant to see those. Amy stood there, trying to steady her breathing. Why not? She asked quietly. Why didn't you tell me? He looked away, staring at the wall. A range of emotions played out on his face. Fear, vulnerability, maybe shame. Because I was worried it might change things between us, he said softly. I didn't know how to bring it up. I never thought you'd find them. I kept them locked away. She blinked back tears. I feel like I don't even know you right now. Or there's this massive part of you I've never seen. He swallowed hard, swinging his legs off the side of the bed and standing up. His posture was tense. It's still me, I promise. It's just something I do sometimes, when I'm alone or when I have the chance. I don't know how else to explain it. It felt comforting. I liked the way I looked and felt. I never wanted to hurt you, and I never wanted to keep secrets. But I didn't know how you'd react. She let the words sink in. The room felt thick with unspoken tensions, each second a pulse of uncertainty. Finally, she stepped closer. I just wish I had known, she said, her voice breaking. I wish you had trusted me enough to tell me. I didn't want to risk losing you, he managed, his eyes pinned to a point in space. He seemed almost paralyzed, as if every muscle in his body had locked up. It's never been about shutting you out, but maybe I was shutting you out. I'm sorry. Amy's shoulders slumped. She sank onto the bed. If she thought about it too long, she might feel angry or betrayed. But right now, she mostly felt sorrow that he'd carried this alone. She looked at the half-dismantled speaker, then back at him. All this time, you've been worried about how I might react to something that apparently you've been doing for a while. I'm trying to figure out how to handle this. I'm not going to pretend it isn't surprising, but I'm not here to hate you or anything. She drew in a shaky breath. I'm just confused. Jason nodded, relief and trepidation mixing on his face. I understand. He chewed on his lip. Do you want me to explain more? Or should I give you space? She studied his face, her mind still spinning. I want to know, but I'm not even sure what questions to ask. He walked a few steps over to the window, lifting the shade to let in more light, as though searching for an anchor in the mundane. I started exploring this part of me in college, he said quietly, looking outside. It wasn't constant, but every once in a while I'd feel this urge. It felt natural to try on different outfits, especially dresses. I didn't talk about it much, if at all. After college, when we got married, the desire still came and went. But I was terrified to bring it up. It was my secret, something I felt I needed to manage on my own. So I created that folder in the cloud, thinking if I labeled it as private, it would be locked away for me alone. Amy nodded slowly, trying to wrap her head around it. I wish I'd known you better, known what was going on inside your head. We share a lot, but apparently not everything. He turned around, his eyes filled with regret. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hide it in a way that would hurt you. I was just afraid. They both stood there for a moment in taut silence. Then Amy realized she didn't want to stay trapped in this wordless tension. "Come with me," she said, her voice softening. She motioned for him to follow her back downstairs. She wasn't even sure why she suggested it, but the bedroom suddenly felt too cramped for both of their swirling thoughts. They walked into the living room, and she sat on the couch. He lowered himself carefully onto the armchair across from her, knees almost touching hers. Their eyes locked briefly, and she could see he was searching her face for some clue as to what she was feeling. She reached for his hand. "Tell me more," she said, "about how you feel when you do this. I need to know why it's important." He glanced down, his voice wavering at first. "It started as curiosity, I guess. I tried something on once. It surprised me how comforting it felt. Over time, it wasn't just about the fabric or the style. It was a part of me. It felt like, in those moments, I could let go of certain expectations. My mind felt calmer in a way I can't fully describe." He ran a hand through his hair, letting out a deep breath. "I don't do it every day. Sometimes I go weeks without even thinking about it. Then suddenly, the urge is strong again, and I might dress that way at home. I take photos because, I don't know, maybe it helps me remember that side." Amy pressed her lips together, listening carefully. "And calling yourself Jessica?" she asked, recalling a stray detail from the search results. "I saw that name in some file descriptions. Are you?" Jason nodded. "That's just a name I gave this part of me. I used it on certain files so I could keep it separate, I guess. It's not something I expect anyone else to call me. It's just a small label for myself in my own head." There was another drawn-out pause. Amy could see that tears threatened behind his eyes, though he kept them from rolling down his cheeks. She rubbed her thumb over the back of his hand. She wasn't certain how to react, but she knew her immediate response wouldn't be to lash out or blame him. That instinct had evaporated the moment she saw the scared look in his eyes. She could sense how long he'd been carrying this. "So," she said at last, "we have to figure out what this means for us. I won't lie, this is a shock, and I have to let myself feel surprised. But it's not the end of the world. Just, I need time to absorb it. Can you give me that?" Jason nodded emphatically. "Take all the time you need. If you have questions, I'll try my best to answer them. If you'd rather I leave you alone so you can think, I can do that too." She looked down at their joined hands. "I'm not asking you to leave. I just need to process." Then a sad smile twisted her lips. "It's kind of ironic, right? We rely on that cloud service because it's efficient. It recognized your pictures, pulled them up. Now, here we are." He exhaled, looking guilty and uneasy at the same time. "I guess I never counted on advanced image recognition going through my personal folder. I thought I'd locked it well enough." Amy closed her eyes for a moment, letting the hum of the air conditioner fill the silence. "Technology exposed the truth," she murmured. "We might as well deal with it." They spent the next hour in hesitant conversation, occasionally drifting into long silences. Jason did his best to explain the origins of his hidden habits, and Amy asked questions when she could find her voice. Sometimes she'd lean forward, resting her elbows on her thighs, trying to piece together aspects of their married life that might have hinted at this. She remembered vague moments, times he seemed distant, times he'd run errands alone and returned in a pensive mood. Perhaps these were the days he was grappling with that internal struggle. She remembered once, several years ago, seeing a small smudge of concealer on his cheek when he'd come home from getting groceries, but she'd shrugged it off as a trick of the light. "You must have felt so alone," she said quietly at one point. not wanting to use a certain term, but still acknowledging the pain he'd carried. She felt tears sting at the corners of her eyes again. Jason didn't reply immediately, but she saw the guilty gratitude on his face. "I was so scared," he whispered. "You have to know I never wanted to hurt you." Time slipped by as they turned over the shock, the confusion, the emotional jolt. By early evening, the light was fading through the windows, leaving the room in the soft glow of a nearby lamp. Amy eventually wandered into the kitchen to start dinner, and Jason followed. Without speaking, they fell into a routine, chopping vegetables side by side. The tension in the air remained, but they also had that comforting familiarity of a couple who had shared a life for years. It wasn't gone, that sense of partnership. It had just changed shape. When they finally sat at the small kitchen table, plates in front of them, it felt like a moment of hesitant truce. Neither had much of an appetite, but they forced themselves to eat. The conversation about the day's discovery continued in disjointed starts and stops. "Are you upset that I found out this way?" she asked softly. Jason set his fork down. "Yes and no. I hate how it happened. If I could choose, I would have told you in a calmer, more respectful setting. But part of me is... I guess I'm glad it's not hidden anymore, even though it's terrifying. You deserve honesty." She nodded. "That's fair. I still wish I'd stumbled on it differently." She cracked a small, pained smile. "But I guess this is the reality. Now we move forward somehow." That night, Amy found herself lying awake in bed, the sheets tangled around her ankles. Jason lay next to her, but his breathing pattern made it clear he wasn't sleeping either. Occasionally, she'd glance at him in the dark, his eyes open. So many questions circled in her mind, but she didn't want to push him further while he was clearly on edge. Eventually, they both drifted off into uneasy rest. The next morning, a sliver of sunshine spilled through the curtains onto Amy's face, waking her earlier than usual. Jason was already up. She smelled fresh coffee in the kitchen. She slipped out of bed and shuffled into the living room, where Jason sat on the couch, phone in hand. He was obviously checking the cloud storage settings. A tight expression fixed his jaw. "Good morning," she said, forcing a gentle tone. "Is everything okay?" He didn't look up immediately. "I'm trying to see if there's a way to separate the AI function from private folders, so this doesn't happen again. Might be too late now, but, you know." She took a seat beside him. "It's definitely too late to hide it from me, but I understand." She gave a cautious smile. "Did you sleep at all?" "A little," he admitted. "Kept tossing and turning, though." "Same." He set his phone aside and tentatively put an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, letting out a breath she'd been holding. "I know this is weird," she said. "I keep looking at you and thinking of those photos. I'm trying to figure out how I feel. It's not bad, just new." Jason nodded slowly. "I know. If you need to see them again, to ask me questions, I'm willing." She hesitated, then shook her head. "Not right now, but maybe at some point I will want to. Right now, I need us to figure out a way to talk about it without me feeling overwhelmed." He rubbed her shoulder gently. "We can go slow." They spent the day doing mundane chores, folding laundry, reorganizing the closet, sorting through some old boxes in the garage. Occasionally, a moment of tension would flare up when they'd catch each other's eye. Amy found herself scanning Jason's expressions, noticing subtle changes in how he carried himself. She was searching for a clue, something that would tell her how to reconcile the person she knew with the hidden dimension revealed by those photos. In the afternoon, they took a walk around the neighborhood. Gray clouds loomed overhead, threatening rain, but they set out anyway, arms swinging by their sides as they ambled over the sidewalk. They didn't speak about the recent discovery right away, instead commenting on the neighbors' gardens, the humidity in the air, the possibility of a summer storm. Only when they turned onto a quieter street did Amy bring up the topic again. "What are you most worried about now?" she asked, carefully meeting his gaze. He exhaled, looking down at his sneakers. "That you might see me differently. Not physically, but in a deeper sense. Maybe you'll question our entire marriage or think I'm a stranger." She nodded. "I won't lie. I'm disoriented. But I still love you. And I also know there's more to a person than one aspect of what they do or what they wear. Maybe I just wish I could have supported you or known before it piled up." He hesitated, then reached out. She slid her hand into his, and they walked the rest of the block like that, silent but connected. By the time they returned home, the clouds had opened up, releasing a light drizzle that wet their shirts. They hustled inside, laughing breathlessly as they slid out of their damp shoes. Jason rubbed the towel through his hair in the entryway, water dripping onto the tile. Amy watched him for a moment, the easy grin that spread across his face, reminding her of simpler times. She thought about how jarring it felt to discover that he had a side he kept hidden. It pained her because she prided herself on the closeness of their relationship. That evening, they settled on the couch. Jason handed her a mug of hot tea. She gently cradled it, letting the warmth seep into her palms. He cleared his throat, the sound heavy in the room. "I was thinking," he began, "maybe sometime, only if you're okay with it, I could show you. Not just pictures, but actually show you how I look in those clothes. I don't want to shock you or rush you, but if you want to see, I can." Amy inhaled, closing her eyes for a moment. "That's a big step. I'm not sure if I'm ready right now, but maybe soon. Let me think." He nodded, relief mingling with nerves in his face. They sipped their drinks, letting the murmur of a background TV show fill the hush of the living room. It occurred to Amy that while the initial shock had rattled her, the raw truth was out. Now it was a matter of how they would handle the knowledge in the long run. A few days later, Amy found herself alone in the house one afternoon. Jason had gone to run errands, picking up groceries and dropping some documents at the post office. She stood in front of the computer again, drawn by a strange pull to revisit that private folder. Her mind still spun with questions, and she wondered if giving the photos another look would help her piece things together. She logged in and navigated to the folder. The password prompt opened, but as before, the system recognized her as part of the main account. Within seconds, she was staring at a grid of thumbnails again, images of Jason or Jessica, each file representing a carefully preserved moment in time. She clicked on one, her pulse quickening at the sight of him wearing a fitted blouse and a knee-length skirt, leaning against a wall, a hesitant smile on his face. In another, he was seated on the living room couch, crossing his legs in a poised way, the camera angled from above. She noticed the soft curves of his face, the way he must have styled his hair. It struck her that he had obviously put real care into these photos. She let out a long exhale, feeling both sadness and awe. She sensed that this was not a joke for him, not some casual whim. Each image was meticulously posed, with an attention to detail she wasn't used to seeing in his usual life. She scrolled further, noticing a progression in the pictures, from older shots that were simpler, with less confident poses, to more recent ones in which he looked more relaxed, even playful. It was as though he had gained a measure of comfort over time. Maybe that was what unsettled her most. He had changed and grown in this part of his life, but she had missed it entirely. She closed the folder with a soft click and shut down the computer, her thoughts heavier than before. She wanted to understand, but it felt like diving into unfamiliar waters. Her mind floated to a memory. Right before their wedding, they had confided in each other about big fears, big dreams. He had told her about his concerns with job stability, with financial strain, with not wanting to fail her. Never, though, had he revealed anything about exploring clothes outside of what was typical for him. It stung that this piece of him felt too risky to share. When Jason returned, arms laden with grocery bags, she helped him put everything away without saying much. He seemed to sense her preoccupation. As he loaded vegetables into the fridge, he asked gently, "Are you doing okay?" "I looked at the photos again," she admitted, sliding a carton of milk onto the bottom shelf. "I'm still processing." He nodded, lips pressed tight. "I understand. Let me know if there's anything I can do." She gave a brief nod, turning to place a box of cereal in a cupboard. "Thank you." Over the next week, they settled into an uneasy routine, everyday tasks mixed with constant awareness of what lay beneath their surface conversations. At one point, Amy took the bold step of asking if she could see some of his clothing. Jason hesitated, but eventually led her to a locked trunk in their bedroom closet. He fidgeted with the small combination lock for a moment, then opened the lid. Inside were a few neatly folded dresses, skirts, blouses, and even a couple of pairs of shoes. She picked up a blue summer dress, running her fingers across the soft fabric. It was well made, and the thought of him wearing it flashed through her mind, conjuring the images she had seen. "I've never seen these in the laundry," she remarked softly. He offered a faint, apologetic shrug. "I take care of them separately. I do laundry when you're not home, or I wash them in the sink if it's just a small item." She swallowed the knot in her throat. "Where did you buy them?" "Mostly online. Packages come in discreet boxes. Sometimes I pay for them with a prepaid card so it doesn't show up in our account statement. I know this all sounds so secretive." Amy nodded, placing the dress back in the trunk gently. "It does, but it also makes sense if you felt you couldn't be open about it." They locked the trunk again, and as she turned to go, Jason touched her shoulder. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know it's a lot." She covered his hand with hers. "We'll keep talking about it." In the days that followed, talk they did. Here and there, they'd share quiet moments on the couch or walking around the block, gingerly exploring how they might handle this change. Amy found the complexities piling up. What if he wanted to dress like that around her someday? Could she handle that without feeling like the ground was shifting beneath her feet? She also wondered if he had told anyone else, friends maybe, or strangers online. It felt overwhelming. One evening, Amy returned from a long day at work. She entered the house to find Jason standing in the living room, wearing one of his outfits, a floral skirt, a short-sleeved blouse. She paused at the threshold, heart pounding. They locked eyes. She recognized the fear and hope in his expression. "I can change if this is too much," he offered quickly, stepping back. She stood still, letting the initial jolt wash over her. Then she shook her head slowly. "No, you don't have to. It's your home too." He swallowed, clearly emotional. "I just thought, maybe I should let you see me as I am, not only in photos." She set her bag down, unsure whether to move closer or keep her distance. A swirl of apprehension and compassion mixed inside her. "Thank you for being brave," she said, choosing the words carefully. "It's surprising to see in person, but I appreciate that you trust me enough." His posture relaxed, though tension lingered around his eyes. Amy approached, every step feeling momentous. She observed the small details, the subtle makeup around his eyes, the way his shoulders looked less tense than usual. He stood with a delicate confidence she recognized from the pictures. It was almost as if this version of Jason had existed quietly, waiting for a moment to be acknowledged. They moved to the couch and sat down together. Amy turned to face him. "You look comfortable," she said, her tone uncertain but not critical. "Are you comfortable?" He nodded, folding his hands in his lap. "I am. Nervous, but more comfortable than I expected. And, with you here, I'm terrified, but also relieved." She studied his skirt, the print of the fabric, the slight angle at which he was seated. She realized that the raw truth was that this was her husband, the man she'd loved for years, simply wearing something outside the norm. It didn't erase the feelings she had for him. It didn't erase the memories they shared. Yes, it was new and strange to her, but it didn't have to destroy what they had, unless they let it. She reached out, placing a hand gently on his knee. "I'm still figuring out how to navigate it," she admitted, "but I can see how important it is to you." His eyes welled up, and he quickly brushed away the moisture. "Thank you," he whispered. "It means a lot to hear you say that." In the weeks that followed, they found themselves in a slow, deliberate adjustment process. Jason stopped trying to hide his outfits at home. Sometimes he'd change when she came in, if he guessed she might need a break from seeing it. Other times, she would come home and find him dressed that way, and they'd share the living room in a tentative peace. They set boundaries. If she felt overwhelmed, she'd say so, and he'd give her space. If he wanted to experiment with a new look, he'd mention it beforehand. They talked about the future, about whether he would continue this in the outside world or keep it private. He confessed he mostly planned to keep it indoors, away from neighbors or strangers, at least for now. One particularly revealing conversation happened on a crisp Saturday morning. They were sitting at the breakfast table, drinking coffee and nibbling on toast. Amy decided to voice one of the bigger questions lingering in her mind. "I worry about what this means for our relationship dynamics," she said. "Like, am I supposed to do your makeup or share clothes with you now? Or do we keep things totally separate? I'm not sure what to do." Jason's cheeks flushed. "I've fantasized about us sharing little things, maybe an accessory or tips on how to style hair, but I don't want to assume or pressure you. I know this is new." She sipped her coffee, thoughtful. "I'm not opposed to any of it in principle. I'm just letting you know I need time. Maybe one day we can experiment with something small, like you borrowing a scarf or a belt. Let's keep communication open." He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Thank you. I'm grateful you haven't shut me out." As the weeks wore on, Amy began to adapt. She found herself less startled each time she saw a floral dress in the laundry basket, now that he had finally started mixing his things with theirs. She found it increasingly normal to see him lounge on the sofa in a skirt while they watched a show together. Of course, it was never entirely without pangs of uncertainty, but her initial alarm had softened into a careful acceptance that her husband had this side that needed space. They resumed everyday life in many respects. Work deadlines came and went. Social outings with friends filled their weekends, though Jason always dressed in his usual shirts and jeans outside their home. Over time, the Cloud Drive fiasco became a memory, albeit a pivotal one. Occasionally, they'd joke about how ironically thorough the AI had been. One evening, while they were both relaxing after a long day, Amy brought out her phone and scrolled through the Cloud Drive with Jason beside her. "Look," she said, searching for a moment that might bring them laughter. She found the older Florida photos, the ones that had kicked off the entire situation. They both stared at the image of them grinning under the golden sky, carefree on that pier. "It's still a great photo," he said softly, placing an arm around her. She nodded. "I agree." Then she navigated to the images of Jessica. It no longer provoked the same shock. though it still brought out a twinge of emotion she couldn't fully describe. She glanced at Jason. "We could reorganize them, put them somewhere truly private. No chance of accidental AI scans." He let out a wry laugh. "Probably a good idea. Don't want them popping up at Thanksgiving when we're pulling up family pictures." They both chuckled at the thought, the humor easing some leftover tension. Then they fell quiet, gazing at the screen. Amy turned and rested her head on his shoulder. "We came a long way from that first day when I found out," she murmured. "It still feels strange, but it's not the end of us." He slid his hand around her back, leaning gently into her. "No, it doesn't have to be the end. We just have to keep navigating it together." They spent the next hour transferring the Jessica photos into a secure digital vault, this time making sure the AI recognition function wouldn't accidentally tie them to random searches again. Every time a thumbnail popped up, Amy glimpsed the corners of their shared experiences, some behind the camera, others in front of it. She recognized the vulnerability in his eyes, something she'd rarely seen so clearly in any other context. Near the end, when they had almost finished sorting, Amy paused on a certain photo, one that showed Jason sitting at the dining table, wearing a casual sundress, apparently engrossed in a small craft project. She recognized that it was their own dining table. The photo's composition was surprisingly pretty, with sunlight streaming in from the window. She turned to him, a thoughtful look on her face. "Did you take this with a timer?" she asked. He looked at it and nodded. "Yeah, I set the camera on the counter. I liked that shot because it was a calm afternoon, just me being me." Amy inhaled. "It's beautiful," she admitted, her voice wavering a bit. "You look content." Jason reached out to brush a hand along her arm. "Thank you." Closing the cloud drive, she gently set her phone aside. They shared a glance that carried more weight than 100 casual conversations. She leaned forward, pressing a light kiss to his cheek. "I'm going to try to get used to this," she said. "We'll figure it out." He took her hand and squeezed it softly. "That's all I can ask." Over time, they formed an unspoken routine. Some days Jason would come home and slip into a dress if he felt like it. Some days he didn't. Amy tried offering small suggestions, a particular pair of shoes that might match, or an accessory she thought he might like. It still felt odd, but there was also a sense of honest conversation that hadn't been there before. They discovered that discussing things openly created a closeness they hadn't fully experienced. Still, not everything was simple. There were nights when Amy cried quietly, missing the unruffled certainty she once had. She worried about what others would think if they ever found out, or how Jason might change in the future. Jason, for his part, grappled with guilt for having kept secrets. Occasionally their talks turned to frustration, Amy accusing him of shutting her out, and Jason feeling that she wouldn't truly understand. But each time, they circled back to the same core idea. They were together in this house, they cared for each other, and they wanted to keep going. A few months after the initial discovery, Amy found herself sitting in the bedroom, rummaging through her jewelry box, looking for a necklace to match her outfit for a work party. Jason walked in wearing jeans and a casual polo shirt. She glanced at him, beckoning him over. "Can you help me clasp this?" she asked, holding up a delicate chain. "Sure." He stepped closer and fastened it, his fingers careful against the back of her neck. She met his eyes in the mirror. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet. She turned around, looking at him more directly. "By the way, next weekend, if you want to, maybe you could wear something more comfortable around me. I'll be home, no one else will be around, and I'll be okay with it." He blinked, hope brightening his expression. "Yeah? You mean one of my dresses or something?" She nodded, letting out a soft breath. "Yes, I'm ready to see you more often that way." She paused, the corners of her mouth lifting slightly. "I'm not saying it won't feel strange, but I feel better about it now." He leaned in and kissed her gently on the forehead. "I appreciate that," he murmured, genuine gratitude in his tone. Saturday came, and Jason spent part of the afternoon in one of his floral outfits. At first, Amy felt that little twinge of awkwardness, but she pushed through it. They ended up cooking together, making a simple chicken stir-fry. Jason tied an apron around his waist, still wearing the dress. They bantered about the right amount of seasoning. By the time they carried their plates to the table, they were deep in a conversation about a new show they were both interested in. The clothing he wore seemed secondary to the normalcy of everyday life. Sitting across from each other, they shared jokes, opinions, and a sense of mild accomplishment at how far they had come since that jarring discovery. Later, while doing the dishes, Amy glanced at Jason. Water droplets splashed the apron, and he let out a mock groan about the ever-increasing stack of plates. She offered to dry, and he washed. The synergy was comfortable, the tasks automatic. In a quiet moment, he looked at her and said, "Thank you." "For helping you do dishes?" she teased. He shook his head, a small, heartfelt smile on his face. "No, for everything else. For letting this part of me exist here, with you." She set down a dish and wiped her hands. "I made a choice," she said, her voice thoughtful. "I could either let this tear us apart or try to adapt. And I do love you, so yeah, I guess I chose to adapt." He put a damp hand over hers, and she didn't flinch. Instead, she returned the pressure of his fingers. They looked at each other in the warm glow of the kitchen light, 1,000 unspoken truths passing between them. Over the next few months, there were ups and downs, but each day carried them further from the initial shock of that AI-generated revelation. Occasionally, Amy would still open the cloud drive, and she'd see the reorganized folder. She might peek at a new photo that Jason added, or sometimes he'd show her a new outfit he bought. They'd talk about it, sometimes clumsily, sometimes warmly. The memory of that intense afternoon when the AI had thrown his private images into her Florida search had faded, overshadowed by the deeper reality of who Jason was and who they were together. One night they cuddled on the couch, watching an old movie. Jason wore sweatpants and a t-shirt that evening, and Amy was wrapped in a blanket, their legs tangled comfortably. Midway through the film, Amy glanced at him and felt a wave of tenderness. Leaning against his shoulder, she reflected on the fact that they had been tested in a deeply personal way. The crucial parts of their relationship, the trust, the care, had bent but not broken. They had survived the confrontation spurred by a piece of technology that never intended to meddle in human secrets. She felt Jason's hand brush through her hair, a small, reassuring gesture. Turning her face to meet his, she kissed him lightly. In that moment, she realized that she knew more of him now than she ever had before. Their journey had changed them, and there were still open questions about how their life would evolve. But at least they weren't afraid to talk about it anymore. Jason gave her a curious look. "You okay?" She snuggled closer. "Yeah," she murmured, letting her cheek rest on his chest. "I'm okay." He pressed a soft kiss to her temple, and they returned to the movie's storyline. Outside, the moon hung low over the suburban streets. In their living room, the glow of the screen flickered across their faces, illuminating two individuals who had been forced into a place of vulnerability and had come out the other side, changed yet still together. They stayed like that until the credits rolled. Then, as the house grew quiet, they clicked off the TV, turned out the lights, and climbed the stairs to bed. Their world felt simultaneously more fragile and more resilient. The next day would bring its own tasks, errands, and perhaps new discussions about what it all meant. But for that night, In the darkness, they found solace in each other's presence, a renewed bond shaped by honesty.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.